American Crisis, Our Neighbors Experiencing Poverty by Edwin and Molly Mann.
When we think of crisis, what do we think? To many people, we think of a major life altering event, but many people in the United States wrestle with the daily struggles of living in poverty. Does this surprise you? Poverty isn't necessarily defined by what society views it as. There are many perspectives and measurements of those experiencing poverty that we will unravel.
Money, resources, health, education. What does the word poverty really mean? These words may all sound familiar to you when it comes to defining the word poverty. In our fast paced world, we are taught to believe that the most common definition comes from economic and financial means. Those who lack a source of income or wealth in order to enjoy a minimal standard of life in our society are said to be living a life in poverty. Without money, can one buy what is necessary to survive? More so, is someone able to keep up to the demands and expectations of society? These thoughts are the drive behind the financial poverty definition. However, does this definition really define and cover the true meaning of poverty? Many argue that poverty is not to be defined and only looked at under the financial definition and perspective. Poverty can be looked at through the capabilities measure better defined by Nussbaum. She has taken a different approach to poverty, which takes into account various aspects of life aside from the financial situation that one might be in. Nussbaum has broken down the 10 central capabilities that can define poverty into life, bodily health, bodily integrity, senses, imagination, and thoughts, emotions, practical reason, affiliation, other species, play, and control over one's environment. These 10 central capabilities are an essential part of life that can affect one if there is a genuine lack of any of the 10 resources. The OPM and SPM take different approaches on these matters, but the SPM captures the true definition of poverty as we have mentioned, making it the better measurement of poverty.
Have you ever really wanted to do something? Take, for example, going to a concert on a Friday night, but not had the money to buy tickets or the time to make it happen. Chances are you have, and you're not alone in this situation. You want to go, but you don't have the capability due to your busy schedule and shortness of financial means. This is an example of lacking capabilities. A capability is defined by Nussbaum as what a person is physically able to do and be, and in Nussbaum's paraphrasing of Sen's idea as not just abilities residing inside a person, but also the freedoms or opportunities created by a combination of personal abilities and the political, social, and economic environment. Now, what about this? Have you ever had the option of doing something, such as going to that same concert, but opt out and choose to do something else instead? In this situation, you have the capability to go to the concert, but don't end up turning that opportunity into a functioning. Sen defines a functioning as the various things that he or she manages to do or be in leading a life, which essentially means what you do in your everyday life. Using these two examples, it can be seen that your functionings can only consist of the things you are capable of doing. So, regardless of how badly you want to go to that concert, if you aren't capable of going, attending cannot be a functioning.
Since 1963, the United States has been using the OPM to officially measure and define poverty in the United States. When the program first started, the Department of Agriculture took large part in the project. They managed the task to devise the Economy Food Plan that would be used to set a threshold for the OPM. The Economy Food Plan was essentially the sum of every food that was deemed as necessary for a family living in poverty. This measurement by no means included what deemed necessary in society, as the Department of Agriculture thought these to be unessential for the survival of those living in poverty. In order to create a threshold for the government to decide whether families fell below or rose above poverty in the United States, the OPM used the Economy Food Plan and multiplied the amount by 3. This was the case as Meyer and Wallace stated that during 1960s, families spent one-third of their income on food. The amount would only be adjusted according to farm or non-farm status, the number of children, the head of the household, and the age of the children in the household. Now, the Census Bureau conducts 50,000 interviews to selected families. These families consist of those related by blood or marriage only. Depending on the size of the family, they are then compared to the current threshold at hand and found to be living in poverty or out of poverty.
Imagine you're a farmer in the 1960s and have to work every day to feed your family. The majority of your time is spent out in the fields cultivating food. It would make sense to base a poverty measurement on how much your food costs because you must spend so much time and resources growing it. Now, fast forward 50 years. That same family now buys all of their food from the local grocery store and spends a lot less time, resources, and money paying for their food. Does it still make sense for the poverty measurement to be set up in the same way, even though society is very different? This is why we say that a problem with the OPM is that it is outdated. Families are still being counted like they were back 50 years ago.
The OPM also doesn't include in-kind benefits. What are in-kind benefits, you might ask? They are issued by the government to use for a specific purpose. For example, food stamps are in-kind benefits and can only be used on food products at specific stores. SNAP, WIC, and Medicaid are a few other examples of in-kind benefits that the OPM doesn't take into account. One might wonder, why is this a problem? This is a problem because not every person below the poverty line qualifies or takes advantage of in-kind benefits. The use of these significantly affects how much a person might be able to spend on other things or have as available cash.
How much does it cost to buy a gallon of milk? What about a tank of gas? Or to pay off your car or pay your rent? These values are all dependent on the consumer price index at the time. The CPI changes similarly to the inflation rate and affects the price of goods, which really changes things for people experiencing poverty. Again, the OPM ignores the consumer price index.
Have you ever wanted to go out for a fancy dinner to celebrate an event with family? Where do you typically go? In some areas, people like to venture towards the downtown area because there are sometimes nicer restaurants in the city center. These nicer level restaurants are situated in an area with expensive housing, shopping venues, and even grocery stores. Depending on where you live, it costs different amounts to sustain a person or to meet family needs. Another fault of the OPM is that it makes no mention of the location or where a person resides. Therefore, two people with identical salaries could be in very different financial situations based on where they live.
Do you have clothes on your back, a bed to sleep in, enough food to eat, some place safe to come home to every night? If you have your basic needs met, you're surviving, but are you necessarily doing it comfortably? Standard of living is a very important thing to consider when you think about how you live. The OPM doesn't take into consideration whether or not its patrons sustain a comfortable life by any means. So long as they are above the poverty threshold, they are fine. This refers back to Nussbaum's 10 central capabilities.
Picture a woman who lives with her boyfriend and has two children, both from a past relationship. Who pays for these children? The man from the past, the boyfriend, or the woman? According to the OPM, even if the current boyfriend provides for the kids, unless child support is being paid for, the mom is the only one supporting the children, which leads to her financial capabilities seeming much lower than they actually are. However, the SPM accounts for the boyfriend as part of the family and includes the income provided by the boyfriend. Now consider that they are living in a city such as New York. The SPM will adjust accordingly to the cost of living in a city such as New York. Unlike the OPM, which treats the cost of living in New York as the same as a small rural city in Virginia. Now, if the family were to receive in-kind and near-cash benefits issued by the government, such as food stamps, WIC, and Medicaid, the SPM takes these into account and truly reflects the amount of cash they have readily available to spend on other things. The changes in the SPM from the OPM make a difference when placing the family above or below the poverty threshold. Considering the cohabitant households, geographic location, near cash, in cash benefits, and non discretionary spending, the SPM is a better form of measuring poverty in America.
Imagine that you work for the US government and are responsible for collecting data for an important survey. You're told that you must obtain statistics from US families about their tax records, family composition, geographic location, benefit receipts, income, and non discretionary spending, and then also use a complex calculation technique to assess which families are in poverty and where the poverty line should lie. However, on top of this, you still aren't able to get the full picture. You don't know what people's standard of living is, nor will you be able to completely assess what the poverty statistics should be. This sounds like a very steep task with an unofficial result, and in fact it is. It also seems to be a bit expensive to calculate all these things. However, in this situation, the ends justify the means. When it comes to creating a relevant statistic to define poverty, it's very difficult, but the SPM does the most accurate job of any measurement that we currently have. For these reasons, we support the SPM as the major poverty measurement in America.
So, why do we care what the poverty measurement is? We care because the poverty measurement shapes policy and affects how our nation regards those experiencing poverty. In the end, the people are what matter, and the more accurate our measurement, the better we can support the individuals in our nation. Poverty isn't about numbers on a page or percentages flashed on the news. It's about the faces behind it and what we can personally do to help.